getting Kansans back on the road, a celebration of a new law to do just that. But is it enough? Plus, ambulances showing up late, endangering your health. What is Sedgwick County doing about it? But first, overturning what one judge calls the ultimate legislative stick intended to supplant judicial rules and promote legal anarchy. That's what we're talking about right now on Kansas Week. Welcome to Kansas Week. I'm your host, Pilar Pedraza. We begin tonight with the lawsuit surrounding SB 40, which put in place sweeping reforms to Kansas emergency management laws and stripped powers from local health officials. The fiery language from the judge who ruled it unenforceable. Under SB 40, Kansans can demand a hearing or file a civil suit challenging COVID-19 related orders from a local governmental body, school board, or public health officer. A hearing would have to be held within a matter of days. After the passage of this bill, most Kansas counties dropped their COVID pandemic restrictions, saying they couldn't afford any potential legal battles. Judge David Hauber Thursday invalidated core portions of the law and restored the ability of health officers to issue orders without the oversight of other county officials. In his ruling, he said many of the law's provisions were unenforceable, writing, quote, "It is the ultimate legislative stick intended to goad and or supplant judicial rules and functions, and it promotes the equivalent of legal anarchy." He added that the act goes beyond the emergency that ended June 15th because it amended the Kansas Emergency Management Act for future situations, retaining the offensive provisions. Hauber wrote, "Whether it is this pandemic, a variant that may require another pandemic emergency, or any kind of future emergency, this issue is too important and capable of repetition to be ignored." Currently, virus cases in the state are again rising due to the Delta variant. It is unclear whether this increase will prompt another emergency declaration. And here to help us break this all down, we have Chance Swaim from the Wichita Eagle and Adam Strunk with the Harvey County Now. And joining us by Zoom, we've got Dr. Michael Smith, a political scientist from Emporia State University. Michael, since I've got you up there, we'll start with you. As we look at this, it was a Johnson County judge's ruling, but this is a law that affects the entire state. So what does this ruling mean for all Kansans?
Well, what the judge thinks essentially is that this legislation was really kind of thrown together. It was a response to the first pandemic in generations. And a lot of the ruling was based on overriding the separation of powers. For example, forcing the Supreme Court to expedite certain cases, which would probably take an amendment to the state constitution, which this wasn't. And of course, overriding the governor's powers, or at least greatly limiting them. It's just too much in a single piece of hastily passed legislation. And what it means is, for now, that this law is unenforceable. It also means that individuals can't sue local governments, including school districts, over pandemic precautions.
And that's certainly something that could be a concern as we go into this next school year, with the Delta variant creating rises in several places across the country and including here in Kansas. I know, Adam, you and I both cover school board on a regular basis. What are you hearing? Are there concerns about potential issues with the new school year?
I'm not hearing concerns yet. I mean, I know that a lot of our school districts have drafted their beginning of the year plans. Most of our school districts are masks or optional, vaccines won't be required. But I'm not hearing those concerns. But on that bill, I was struck by, I think in that ruling you're talking about, it was anarchy. And I don't know if anyone got a chance to like cover some of the hearings on a local level, but that law was, there were points where like the school board didn't know, like the school administration didn't know what to do. Like we didn't know what to do. We didn't know what was an open record. We didn't know what wasn't going to be an open record. Like everyone was like questioning and talking about it infringing on the judiciary. One of our hearings we did have had to get cut off because there was a whole docket, right? Like, because they're just getting back after pandemic. They're trying to make it through the docket. And this woman who was, fighting against the mask rules wanted more and more time to lay out all these sources. And the judge eventually said, hey, I have criminal cases. Like, we have to move this forward. And so I wasn't totally surprised that this was struck down.
Yeah, I can't say I was all that surprised either. I know, Chance, I don't know about you, but I spoke with a lot of county commissioners from across the state, and maybe you as well, Adam, who were very frustrated with this law. It felt like the state was coming into their territory and tying their hands behind their backs.
Well, yeah, after after initially telling them, hey, this is all your job to take care
exactly.
of, right? So there's a lot of confusion at every level of government right now and throughout the pandemic with who's doing what and who's responsible for what, who should be tracking what, who do we trust from a political stance, because from local to state to national, there's different crossovers there, so everyone's kind of fighting, and the citizens kind of lose out there on, no matter what your stance is on masks or the pandemic or anything like that. It was a cluster from start to finish. So.
Well, and talking about the Delta variant surging, we know that some of the other countries that led us with the first round have now gone back into shutdowns, including Japan with the emergency order there again as the Olympics are starting. Michael, is there an appetite, if we see numbers skyrocket here again, for another round of COVID restrictions? Or is that simply going to be thrown out the window and it's going to be everybody for themselves?
I think that's an excellent question. I think there's still the issue of COVID fatigue. I still think that folks, most of us aren't epidemiologists, and the idea that they said mask and don't mask and mask again is going to be very upsetting for a lot of folks. If we're being rational about this, and I can't say that we have, but if we're being rational about this, the controversy should probably swirl around things like school closings. Vaccinations and masks are both extraordinarily effective at protecting people and slowing the virus with very little in the way of costs or side effects, or at least very rare ones. School closings have been devastating for communities, families, and the economy. So it'd be nice if we could split this off and confront the conspiracy theories about masks and vaccinations, but have a really robust debate about school closings if that comes up, because that does have an immense social cost, whereas the others don't.
Quick question. Do you see this going to an appeal, or is this the end of the case?
I don't doubt that there will be appeals. Unfortunately, it's election season, otherwise known as silly season. And so I don't know how much of this is about people running for office, kind of shoring up their base, especially going into the primaries, and how much of this is that people think this law is salvageable. If you agree with this judge's ruling, this law was pretty poorly done and may not be salvageable, but we'll see. No, I don't think it's over.
All right, well, we'll have to keep watching it then. Meanwhile, here in Sedgwick County, the fight has turned to the county's ambulance system. This last week, a Wichita Eagle investigation found that the odds of an ambulance reaching an emergency within the industry standard of 9 minutes were just 1 in 3. This as the department is struggling to fill dozens of positions. At least one county commissioner is now demanding change, as KSN's Jessica Watson shows us.
They're afraid that, if something happens to me or my family or to someone that I know, can we really trust the system to provide that care that's really desperately needed?
Commissioner Howell and Commissioner Lacey Cruz both concerned about EMS response times and what Cruz says is a lack of trust that people will come when needed.
It saddens me that we are at this point and we have to resolve this quickly.
In 2019, EMS merged with the Office of the Medical Director, which does training and medical oversight. Howell says since the merge, they've seen a lot of staff departures.
Our attrition rates are much too high, and we have too many unfilled positions, and so this is not a good thing for this county.
I think as we have seen, this system doesn't necessarily work for our community, and so sometimes you have to go back to the drawing board.
The county has hired a law firm to audit EMS. Commissioners expect to receive that report in the next week or so, but it will not be public.
Unfortunately, we are in the middle of an investigation, and we have to let this play out before we can make a decision. That's good policy making, and that's really how we have to, unfortunately, let it happen.
County commissioners say any potential EMS changes fall on the shoulders of the county manager.
The authority is very defined and very clear that things that fall underneath the county manager are really his authority, and he has the right to make those decisions.
And Chance, this was your investigation that broke this story open. Several developments throughout the week. Where do we stand now? Where are we headed?
So right now, the county commission went through an entire meeting Wednesday. The only person who brought it up was Jim Howell, who you just saw talking there, and they've basically said it's now up to the county manager, who works directly for the county commission. So in general, just kind of a management reality there. He has to do what a majority of the commissioners want, or he could be fired. That's basically the commissioner's role right now. Besides, I think it is a little oversimplified to say they can't do anything about this, because they, of course, are our elected representatives. But yeah, they're in kind of a tight spot here, because the EMS employees have been very clear there's no path forward with their current director, Dr. John Gallagher, who they strongly dislike. And in order for them to operate ambulances, they are operating under his medical license. I'm not sure what sort of contingency plans they have in place, or what this audit will in fact find. I don't know what it's looking at exactly, right? Are they looking at response times, or are they? Jim Howe said that it was only the current employees they've interviewed. We talked with several that had left the department, and they were all very clear why they left and what the problems are, laid out in that really long investigation. But right now, I think everyone's kind of frustrated and waiting. Two more EMS workers quit 2 days ago. They both linked to the Eagles coverage and cited some strong feelings against the director as reasons for leaving. I talked to one of them on the phone. He said that he would have stayed if action had been taken sooner. So the delay it seems to be making things worse. So we don't know. We don't know exactly what's going to come of it at this point.
And we certainly know that it is impacting services. When I was speaking with Jim Howell earlier this week, he told me that between the shortage of personnel that they have and required vacations and people calling out sick, et cetera, legitimately, sometimes they're down to as few as 14 ambulances in a given day when they should have 20, 25 out there. Yeah.
No, it's happening every day. They're cutting back ambulances. There are like 2 that are pretty much out of service all the time, and then depending on the staffing levels, they'll take additional trucks off the streets. And when they hit status 0, that means, and if you listen to a police scanner a lot, you'll sometimes hear that called out where it's status 0. And that's when my blood pressure just goes through the roof, because that means there are no available ambulances in the entire county at that moment. And with cardiac arrest, with stroke, if you're not breathing, there are so many different kinds of calls where a quick response will save your life or could save your life, and a slow one could kill you. So it's a matter of life and death, and that really, really worries me as a citizen, and it should worry everyone, because we pay for these ambulance services and have a direct interest in it doing well.
Well, I'm sure you're going to continue to follow it, as will the rest of news media across the city now that you've gotten the ball rolling. We will be coming back to that story later, I'm sure. Meanwhile, the Wichita City Council this week decided to hold off on putting a new anti-discrimination ordinance into effect. It would have directly banned discrimination based on race, religion, or gender identity and sexual preference. Cake's Jackson Overstreet takes a look at why the delay.
It is past time for the city to take action to protect all of us.
So rather than make a decision here with this body, I would strongly encourage you to postpone this.
Wichita City Council this afternoon voted to delay a final vote on the proposed ordinance that would ban discrimination based on race, age, disability, gender, or sexual orientation when it comes to employment, housing, or public accommodations.
5 yeas and 2 nays on delaying this until the 12th.
Councilmember Becky Tuttle motioned for the 90-day pause.
I think our community deserves to have a non-discrimination ordinance. I'm not against that. I just want to make sure it's the best one we can do.
Mayor Brandon Whipple calls the delay a political game, and that no one on the council was able to make an argument against the policy, so they focused on the process.
So I'll remind everyone, this ordinance has been around since 2014 in other areas in Kansas, and not one example that was presented by people who spoke against this cited a Kansas City with an ordinance like this.
Whipple says he fears the delay will end the ordinance outright and it won't be brought back for discussion. Councilman Jared Cirillo disagrees. As the only LGBTQ member of the council, he voted to delay to try to heal the divide he says has been created over the last few weeks. He wants to make sure what is passed is right.
Absolutely. We owe it to the people who have been legitimately wronged
Now, as we look at this, Michael, I'm going to start with you. A lot of different reasons cited for this delay, and a lot of people crying foul on those reasons. Are these legitimate reasons to slow down the implementation of a new ordinance?
As you know, I don't live in Wichita, and you all can speak to the local politics there probably better than I can. But nationally, I think that just bringing my political skills to the fore here, sometimes there's a hope with the delay that controversy can kind of die down. There's also an issue that if people feel listened to, they're more likely to accept the result. And that's kind of what I was hearing in the last gentleman's comments, and it makes sense. My only concern about that is I don't know if that works with culture war issues. So it's a gambit either way. But not knowing all the local politics of Wichita there, that would be what I would presume are motivating this.
Yeah. And here on the desk, Chance and Adam, any surprises that this ended up delaying? I'll be honest, I was a little surprised this went as far as it did. Adam?
No, I'm not surprised. We had this come up right before COVID hit. In Newton, it was a similar situation where it drew very, very strong opinions. And again, I think our ordinance was literally like the city can't discriminate against employees based on all of these things, which I think kind of makes sense. But yeah, so that drew a ton of people, and they tabled it too, and it hasn't gotten brought up since. Yeah. So this doesn't surprise me at all.
Well, yeah, and as Brandon Johnson said from the bench, that wasn't played, but I thought his response to this whole thing was pretty powerful. He said it could be 90 days or 90 years. The same people that are upset are going to be upset. I think it is it's a non-starter for a lot of people that showed up, and 90 days is not going to convince them otherwise. So you've got it's in an interesting space for the council members to work in, because it pushes it closer to their local elections. It's certainly going to up the organized groups' participation in this. So I think it's going to get even rowdier in the future, if I had to guess. Yeah.
Well, certainly, and as we look at the issue there, we look at the leadership in Sedgwick County Republicans, because it was mostly Republicans who were opposing this legislation. You know, the last head of the Sedgwick County Republicans was LGBTQ and open about it. Jared Cirillo, also LGBTQ and open about it. So there's kind of a more open attitude among Sedgwick County Republicans in general, at least in the younger generation coming up. Perhaps maybe a generational difference.
Yeah, it could be. It goes a lot in, I guess, kind of our next topic and some of the other cultural war issues. But you know, if you think about just the different levels of discrimination, right? Both of those people are white males, right? So there's that level of privilege there that it seems to be easier to navigate the United States as a white male, whether you're gay or straight or whatever your background is. Whereas, you know, there's a lot of other people out there who also want to make sure they're protected against discrimination. So it's not a simple solution here to any of this. Yeah.
Never is. Well, we now turn to a special celebration in Wichita of a new law designed to get Kansans with suspended licenses back on the road legally. Activists have been working on this change since 2008, but say it wasn't until my Cake News investigation that it began to make progress, because some lawmakers saw it as just a criminal justice issue.
That wasn't true. What we found, thanks to the wonderful work of Pilar Pedraza in Channel 10 and others, was that there were over 200,000 Kansans that were impacted in this by this bill, and really the crime that was involved was the crime of poverty.
Our investigation found as many as 1 driver in 5 on the road in Sedgwick County is likely to be on a suspended license. Senator Oletha Faust-Godot had been working on this change for years. After the Cake News Investigates stories, lawmakers passed Senate Bill 127 nearly unanimously. It ends the 90-day wait period to get your license back after you've paid all your fines and fees, among other changes. Friday, the governor came to Wichita to celebrate the new law with a ceremonial signing of the bill. She says getting Kansans back behind the wheel legally helps move them from taking state aid to working and paying taxes. She also called it one way to help solve the state's worker shortage problem. She too said stories like the Cake News investigation are key to making changes like this.
I think it's really important that the media uncover these kinds of concerns and issues and real life problems in our society, and then bring that forward so that people who can make a difference, your legislature, your governor, know that it exists and work hard to rectify it.
Despite the celebration, many, including Senator Faust-Godot, have said the fight over suspended driver's licenses isn't over. They called this new bipartisan law just the first step in the reforms needed. And for many of us in the news industry, the chance to open people's eyes to what's going on is a big part of why we do what we do. Certainly the investigation that you spoke of earlier, Chance, plays into that same strain, right? That public service aspect of our jobs.
Yeah, no, it's important to have some independent folks out there looking at issues and bringing them to the forefront, as the governor said, to raise awareness to lawmakers who are kind of either in like a little, literally the Topeka Dome, or they're in their own little bubbles and may not realize the harm some laws may be causing to everyday people. And I think your story definitely brought that to the forefront. So congrats and good work.
Thank you. Yeah. Not the reason we shared the story. We want people to know about the changes. And by the way, there is on August 14th, for those who are interested, the Racial Profiling Board here in Wichita is holding a training session to help folks who maybe need some help figuring out this new law and how they can apply it and get their licenses back. So be on the lookout. You can check out their website as well for that. And Adam, as we look at this, so many of the stories that we do have that potential, and I know that you have done some stories as well that have made some changes.
Well, and I mean, again, not to just hit it over the head and hop on the soapbox, but I mean, this is why we need local journalists. And like, if you're sitting at home and you're saying, I'm glad that I know about that EMS story, or I'm glad I know about this story, or if you see journalism helping you in your day-to-day life, support local journalism. And like, it's just, this is why we do our jobs, but this is why your communities are better off with a strong, healthy journalism ecosystem. And we're really easy people for politicians, for everyone and their dog to scapegoat, but like without, I mean, good quality local journalism, like people's health impacts are impacted, people's legal rights are impacted, people's taxes go up. Like these are things that happen without a strong, healthy journalism ecosystem. And so I hope I drive that home to folks at home.
Yeah. Well, we try. And Michael, one other aspect that was brought up in there, several folks saying that this isn't the end of the changes they want to see made to the state's suspended licensing program. And that's not unusual for legislation, to take things kind of one step at a time, little bites out of the issue.
You are so right about that. I even published an article once called One Step at a Time, which is the name of a Johnny Cash song. This could be the beginning of a series of different reforms. I think there's a bigger picture here, and congratulations from me too, for you, Pilar, but also for local journalism and investigative journalism. But there's a bigger issue here, which is that when you break the law, and that includes traffic laws where irresponsible behavior could cause deaths and injuries, there should be consequences for that. Same thing with other laws, but here's the issue. Once you've served your sentence, whether it be that you can't drive for a certain period of time or incarceration, whatever it is, don't we want people restored to society where they can work and care for their own kids? And many people in this situation do have children, and pay taxes instead of drawing from the taxpayer. And this idea that things like not having the money for the fine or unnecessary court delays delay that process and increase the chances that the person will cycle back into dysfunctional behavior.
Yeah. Well, we've got one more thing to talk about, so we're going to leave that topic aside. The fight over critical race theory in Kansas schools. The State Board of Education chiming in on the debate this week, saying it's not taught at the K-12 level here in Kansas, but still some dissent over what the term standards really means. Rebecca Chung of the KSN Capitol Bureau takes a look.
Critical race theory is not and will not be part of the standards for Kansas schools. That's what state education officials want to make clear as concerns grow over whether local school districts will do the same.
Critical race theory is not in our standards and will not be in our standards.
Chairman Jim Porter drawing a line on the Kansas Board of Education's stance on critical race theory, the study of how race impacts legal systems and policies. A heated debate was sparked over concerns from Republican Party members that the controversial topic was being discussed in the Manhattan-Ogden School District. The group members say proposals for a new program pointed to buzzwords like systemic racism and bias.
Our standards do not include critical race theory. I doubt they ever will.
The state board's been silent on the topic, but now they say it's time to take a stand as public concerns grow over the issue.
Not making a statement is in fact a statement was pretty loud, and that's when I decided that we needed to do something.
In Kansas, the state board sets standards for subject areas, not the curriculum taught in schools. That means the decision ultimately comes down to local school boards. And right now, no schools in the state are teaching critical race theory. That's why some board members say these concerns over whether that will change need to be addressed at the local level.
We really need to take a look at the process that's involved. We have a good process. We just need to follow it.
The board also wants Kansans to educate themselves on what critical race theory is and what it isn't, drawing a distinction between the theory and what's currently taught in Kansas schools. At the Capitol, I'm Rebecca Chung.
And Michael, this has already come up in the race for governor, which means it's probably not an issue that's going to disappear here in Kansas anytime soon.
Well, that's exactly right. When I heard about this back in the 90s in grad school, it was just called critical theory. It didn't have that word race in there. And when put alongside other ideas, including some wonderful ideas from conservatives over the years, like Edmund Burke and others, that it's just another way of looking at things, particularly for those of us in academia, that gives us new ideas and new perspectives. You know, with our K through 12 students, and I see them when they come to college and they're in my classes, we just hope they learned a few of the basics, no matter whether the teacher was liberal or conservative or whatever. Just do you remember some fundamentals so we don't have to start over? I don't really think they're reading academic books about critical theories that professors read and write. However, this has become a red meat issue for Republicans running for the Republican primary, and that is why it's on the agenda.
All right. Well, and I don't know about you guys, but I certainly have a lot of folks reaching out to me that no matter what the State Board of Education is saying, they believe it is an issue in Kansas schools.
Yeah, absolutely. My editorial page for weeks and weeks and weeks, the minute Tucker Carlson started talking about it, the letters started coming in. But like, it's just, the problem is, okay, so it's based in reality, but how the people are applying it, they want to apply it to any historical event that happened that they don't want schools to teach about. And that's a danger. Like, we need to be able to allow teachers, we're running out of time, I'm sorry, to teach history.
All right. And we're going to have to leave it on that note. Thank you so much, Chance and Adam and Michael. We thank you as well for joining us. I hope you found our discussion useful. For now, have a great week and stay safe.